What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. The last few days, as there hasn't been a lot of NBA news actually happening, I've been thinking about what team this offseason has gotten the best or had the best additions overall, and I've went through a lot of different rosters, and so many different teams have improved, and there's just so much talent around the league, and even the bad teams have some really good players. I mean, the Oklahoma City Thunder are a team that pretty much consensus across the league is that they're going to be terrible this year, but they've got a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who knows how good he can be, because we haven't seen him play meaningful basketball in 4 years since he was on the Clippers. I don't even remember how long it's been, but I know he was in the playoffs with them, and he played at a relatively high level, but since then hasn't had much opportunity. The Thunder did have the one season there with Chris Paul where they were okay. They didn't really end up making a big run into the playoffs, but at the end of the day, I had a hard time passing up on talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, who in my opinion have probably had the best offseason out of every team in the NBA if we're talking about straight up additions, and it was all overshadowed by the fact that James Harden, a guy that he's so consistently put into a category of a stingy, a greedy guy, doesn't care about his team, doesn't care about other players, and he came out this year or this offseason and he took a major pay cut, $15 million. I had a video about this in the past when it happened, but now that the offseason's pretty much over for the most part, it is a very good thing to hear, because the 76ers have been able to sign so many quality players just off of James Harden, becoming a little bit more conscious and making a lot more of a team-friendly deal. And that has really, in my opinion, allowed the 76ers to jump from a playoff contender, a team that, likely is going to get knocked out year after year in the first or second round, or maybe just shock you with a Eastern Conference Finals run, all the way up to this team might just make the finals, but everything has to go correct for them. I'm not going to come out here and say that I think the 76ers are going to be the best team in the East. I think they've got a lot of problems, a lot of stuff that they need to build off of, and obviously we don't know what we're going to see out of James Harden. If we get last year's James Harden, it's not really going to be a surefire thing about whether they'll make the playoffs or not, but at the end of the day, if we get, at least, I'd even say 75 to 80% of what James Harden used to be, the 76ers are going to be a team that you do not want to mess with, and they've already had Joel Embiid, a year after year MVP candidate. We all know how good Joel Embiid is, and they just have so many quality players on their roster now. I wanted to make this video more specifically today because they did just sign Montrezl Harrell, who is going to be another, he's from that Houston Rockets team, which is where he really blew up with James Harden. Him and PJ Tucker were both on that team, and James Harden's bringing in his old teammates. It looks like it's going to end up being a really good situation for the 76ers, but at the end of the day, we have to kind of think about how good can this team end up being, because they've had so many opportunities to make that leap. Remember, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid are all on the same team. Kawhi Leonard knocks them out of the playoffs. They've had so many opportunities. Last year, they're just a few games away, few shots, a few plays away from the Eastern Conference Finals, and who knows what would have happened when they took on the Celtics. Joel Embiid misses a few games, and that likely caused them the series against the Miami Heat. There's just so many unlucky moments that the 76ers organization have had to go through, and the things they've had to face off against in the playoffs. Even Markelle Fultz just completely forgot how to shoot a basketball as soon as he was drafted by the 76ers. Ben Simmons forgot how to play basketball as soon as the 76ers lost that playoff series, and I don't completely hold that against Ben Simmons. I'm personally a really big Ben Simmons fan. I think he's a great player, and any 76ers fans watching this are probably going to try and kill me, but I do think he's a really good NBA player, especially when he's playing for the team that he wants to play for. He can't shoot, but he can do everything else pretty much at a really high level, and that's one thing I really love about Ben Simmons and the way he plays basketball. But on the other hand, this team has so much talent coming in, it's not even funny. We just have to know how well they're going to play together. Joel Embiid is obviously going to be an MVP caliber guy. James Harden, we've touched on him just a little bit. James Harden's got to get back to where he was at. If we look at his statistics last year after going to Philadelphia, he left a lot to be desired. In his time in Philadelphia last year, he ended up averaging, let's see how much he averaged. he averaged 21 points per game, but he was shooting a very low percentage, at least for his standards, down to 47%, which ironically was his lowest since 2015. So yeah, he didn't have an outstanding year, but he's recovered from his injury. He's had plenty of time to come back, and I don't think he's ever going to reach that MVP caliber guy. Obviously, he's never going to be averaging 36 points per game again. He's never going to hit 34 points per game, or the amount of assists he had, 11 that one year, 8 the year after, 10 the year after. But he did play really well last year, and I actually misspoke there. He did have 10 assists last year total, 10.3 assists per game. So really the only thing that took a hard fall off for James Harden was his offensive production for himself. He's been helping his teammates get better, and if they can at least get him back up to 25 points per game, I would be extremely happy if I'm a 76ers fan. Then you've got to look at their additions that come in this offseason. Fresh legs, guys that bring experience, one hand, and PJ Tucker, and a guy that can bring defense and a little bit of three-point shooting in Daniel House. We saw how good Daniel House was or can be a few years ago with those Rockets teams in the playoffs. He played really well, especially for a rookie at the time. Now, he has lost his way in the NBA. He hasn't been quite to that level since those years, and unfortunately for him, you know, he's lost a few roster spots. He's been bounced around a few different times, but I'm a big fan of Daniel House. I think he provides a lot of talent that you would definitely want out of an NBA player, but at the end of the day, we all know the biggest acquisition was PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker has been now on, 3 straight deep playoff, no, not 3. I guess we could say 3 straight deep playoff contenders. The Houston Rockets, the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously, he won the championship there. I love PJ as a player. He's a great player. Won the championship in Milwaukee, and then last year with the Miami Heat all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. But at the end of the day, PJ Tucker's 37 years old. You know, he's not averaging anything on offense. He's not going to give you anything on offense. Last year, he averaged about 7.6 points per game, but that's not what he's there for. Maybe he hits a few corner shots, but as long as PJ Tucker can provide them with the defense that we know him for, I don't see how the 76ers cannot jump up or at least improve marginally a few more games won just because of how much PJ Tucker provides on defense and just how well he can help make everyone around him better on defense. And at the end of the day, I think this season comes down to 1 or 2 very important players. And I know this is a little controversial, but for the 76ers to, you know, really make that next jump, and this is going to be difficult to say about Tyrese Maxey because this guy's only 21, and last year he played amazing basketball, especially in the playoffs. He ended up averaging 20.8 points per game atop of 4 assists in the NBA playoffs, but I think Tobias Harris or Tyrese Maxey have to take a leap next year to be that third star in order for the 76ers to make that deep finals run. Now, we've seen them get into the playoffs, and their offense can look stagnant. Their offense can look like they just don't have enough, you know, production from their guys outside of Joel Embiid, and that was even exemplified furthermore when Ben Simmons was their second star. And with James Harden, obviously, he brought in a little bit more offensive production, but he was struggling last year. We saw Tyrese Maxey take over, and I really think Tyrese Maxey needs to do that for an entire season. I think Tyrese Maxey, in my opinion, needs to be a third but very close second option on the 76ers team. I think he needs to be there if James Harden's struggling. He can take over the game, and I personally believe he can. I think he's talented enough to do something like that, take over the game, and provide the 76ers with a spark when they need it. And if he can't, they really need Tobias Harris too. Tobias Harris has been, you know, he's been a good NBA player his entire career, but he's just never been great. The highest he's ever averaged in his career was 20 points per game, and that was back in 2018, still on the Los Angeles Clippers. He really needs to get back to that level, and the last few years he's been good, but he hasn't been as good as his contract should, or as good as he should be, considering how much he's been getting paid. And those two guys, in my opinion, are going to make or break this 76ers season. It doesn't have to do with the role players they brought in. Daniel House Jr., DeAnthony Melton. They still have Furkan Korkmaz, George S. Niang, I already named Daniel House Jr., PJ Tucker, Matisse Thybulle, Shake Milton. They've got a lot of depth. They've got a lot of good young players, prospects, veterans, role players. I think it ultimately comes down to James Harden getting back to at least 75% of what he used to be. And also, Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris have to be very consistent. They need that third guy, that third option to be there just in case James Harden starts to struggle. Because when James Harden struggles, it can get very ugly, and that's the type of player they need backing him up, as somebody that they can count on to hit a shot whenever they need that shot hit. How do you guys feel about the 76ers going forward this season? Is there anybody this offseason that's had a better overall offseason than them? I could see and argue a couple other teams, just because there have been some big acquisitions. The Cavaliers getting Donovan Mitchell, stuff like that. There's been some big names going around. But I just really zoned in on the 76ers, especially after getting Montrezl Harrell. They have so much potential for this season. And as much as I'm a Milwaukee Bucks fan, I do have respect for the 76ers. Unlike the Celtics, I'm excited to see what they can do on the court this year. Thank you guys for watching this one. If you do enjoy my content, hit the like button and subscribe. Talk to you guys next time. Peace.